Welcome to another episode of Jewish Action, the podcast. My name is Gil Student, and I'm the Director of Jewish Media, Publications, and Editorial Communications at the OU. And this is a podcast that discusses articles and topics that appear in the pages of Jewish Action magazine, which is available at jewishaction.com. In today's episode, I continue my conversation with Rebbetzin Dr. Adina Shmidman, discussing the cover story of the summer 2025 issue of Jewish Action, which is about individuals who make a big impact in relatively smaller communities. So Rebbetzin Shmidman is the founding director of the OU's Women's Initiative, which has a wide variety of incredibly successful programs for women in the Orthodox community. Perhaps most famous among them is the Torah Imecha series of Torah classes on a number of topics, most famously Nach Yomi. The Women's Initiative also provides training and conversation for women in communal positions, such as Kala teachers and mikvah ladies. They do so much more and have really taken the community by storm over the 5 years of its existence. This is in large part due to the dynamic energy of Rebbetzin Shmidman, who has already become a legendary leader, although she definitely would not like me saying that. In addition to leading the OU's Women's Initiative, Rebbetzin Shmidman serves as the Rebbetzin of the Lower Merion Synagogue in Bala Cynwyd, Pennsylvania. Before that, she and her husband served the community of Birmingham, Alabama, and that makes her insights on today's topic even more important. Before we begin, though, I should note that this podcast was recorded before we suffered the sudden loss of Rabbi Moshe Hauer Zatzal, who was our teacher, our boss, our friend. And the next issue of Jewish Action will feature Rabbi Hauer on the cover and will include a section devoted to his memory. And that is only the start of what we have planned to commemorate our beloved leader. But this episode was recorded while he was still alive, and his loss was not even a distant possibility in our minds. And so now, we turn back to happier times for our discussion with Rebbetzin Shmidman. Please make sure to follow this podcast and rate it. Also follow Jewish Action on Instagram and other social media. So thank you for that. And now, for what I like to call Jewish interaction. I invited you here for two reasons. Okay. Number one, because you are Rebbetzin Shmidman. And number two, because we have the cover story is Building a Community, Stories from the Ground Up. And you were Rebbetzin at one point for quite a few years in Birmingham, Alabama.
Yes. Or yes, sir.
Not a huge community. So I think you have personal experience in a lot of what was discussed here. The theme of the article is about people who went to smaller communities and were able to make a big difference just by getting involved. And to me, that's a lesson not only in the options that there are in where you can live and the options there are in how you can get involved and make a huge difference, but also what can be done in large communities just by looking at what's been done in smaller communities. You could do that also without leaving Brooklyn or Muncie or Lakewood. Very interesting, though, I found was that when we talk about small communities, two of them are in New Jersey. Like, they're not that far.
Right. Which I'd love to come back to that point because I think it's an interesting point that small communities don't have to be in the middle of nowhere.
Right. Although to be fair, Phoenix, Arizona is not the middle of nowhere. Technically, it's what I think the sixth largest city in the country. It's just the Jewish community there is smaller than in a lot of places.
Correct. But even geographically, I'll make the point now, which is if somebody's looking to live in a small community and they're just perhaps not ready to be to upend their life in maybe ways that we'll talk about. A small community can be a small community near a big community. It doesn't have to be a small community in an out-of-the-way place. And I think that that's exciting because it means that there are opportunities for people in ways that are not overwhelming. So maybe we'll talk more about it.
That's an excellent point. So these articles that we have and the cover story of the fall 2025 issue of Jewish Action. So they describe how religious life in smaller communities can be more rewarding. But is it also easier to slip away from religion when the community is so small? I mean, does it take a certain kind of personality to thrive or rather than shrink in that environment?
It's a good question. So it's just to give a little background. I grew up in New York, so I certainly grew up in a mainstream Orthodox community. My grandparents were Rabbi and Rebbetzin in Great Neck, Long Island. They came to Great Neck when Great Neck, the shul was a house. It's now a thriving community. They lived before that in Malden, Massachusetts, and in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. And I remember when we moved to Birmingham, my grandfather was very excited. Stay as long as you can, and you can really make a difference. The articles focused, I think, more on the lay leadership and on the people in the community. It's interesting to comment from the vantage point of being a Rebbetzin in a small community. We lived in Birmingham for 9 years and then moved to Ballackinwood, Pennsylvania, a suburb of Philadelphia. And this was our 19th Rosh Hashanah. We count in Rosh Hashanahs. So this was our 19th Rosh Hashanah, which is really hard to believe. And I think your question is an interesting question. Is this a place for everybody? I think one has to recognize where they are and what's being asked of them when coming to a community like this. And I'm speaking, obviously, somebody who's in clergy and who's in the rabbinate, hopefully understands. I'll share an anecdote that was very formative for us, but I think has relevance for people who are considering or exploring an option like this. So we came to Birmingham, and we were there maybe a year or two, and we were invited to a bris. This was a sibling of a classmate of our son. He was at the JCC preschool. The family was not a religious family, or we'll say religious yet. And we came to this bris only to find out that the circumcision was already done in the hospital. So there was no bris. And beyond that, the food was kosher style, but was not kosher. The Reform outreach rabbi was an outreach rabbi not for kiruv purposes, but to assure that non-Jewish spouses were. It was complicated. It was very, very, very complicated. There was a chazanit at this event, and we walked out just really quite shell-shocked. And it was a very pivotal moment because we we really could have our approach could have been really one of two approaches. One approach, cynical, dismissive, judgmental, uh, intolerant. What was that? And mocking. Or, and this is where we landed. Look at this family. They have no background, and they're marking their child, maybe not halachically, but they're marking their child's body with the covenant of Avraham Avinu, giving this child a Jewish identity, a Jewish name in the year 2000 in Birmingham, Alabama. That's incredible. Incredible. And we came up with a term, hearkening back to Rav Levi of Barditchev, who was so positive about the Jewish people. And, famous classic story, he saw a man changing a wagon wheel covered in mud, and he's putting on tefillin or he's wearing his tefillin while he's changing the wagon wheel. And, he looks up at Rav Levi, looks up, at heaven, and he says, Hashem, look at your people. Even when they're changing a wagon wheel, they're thinking about you. And so we came up with this term, Barditchevarian, to look and approach whatever we did, or the people that we encountered, the situations that we were involved in, from a Barditchevarian vantage point, from that lens, to be positive. Look where we are. Look what difference we can make, and look at the sacrifices. It's not simple to live in a place like Birmingham, Alabama, where there isn't. It's if you took these people and you plunked them down in the middle of, what do you say, the tri-state, my husband calls it the Bermuda Triangle. I can get lost in there, Lakewood, Muncie, Brooklyn, right? There's infrastructure. Or if you gave them a Jewish education, there's no Jewish education. There's such limited resources, and yet, look at the Jewish identity that these families are creating. It's really quite remarkable. So to go back to your question, if someone is going to come to a community like Birmingham, a small community, a person has to really recognize, I'm here. I need to be present. I need to be involved. I need to be engaged. I need to be positive. To be judgmental, to come and be cynical, to come and try to be anonymous, to sort of, hide in the pews. Why are you here? You can make a difference when every person really, really counts. Don't look for this book anytime soon on Amazon, but if I did write a book, the book was going to be called I Never Thought 10 Was Such a Big Number, Dreidels and Dixie. And because every single person counts for a minion, and it's hard to get to the number 10. When we moved to Birmingham, I would ask my husband every morning, "Did you have a minion? Did you have a minion?" Okay, after a couple of weeks, I realized, like, stop asking because he keeps saying no. And it's really hard. It's really, really hard. But every single person who's there, men for the minion, women to be involved in whatever it is, the preschool, the Sunday school, the shul, the sisterhood, giving shiurim, attending shiurim, every person really counts. And so there's something, I think there's something very invigorating and empowering that you can really, really make a difference. But if you don't want to do that, then it's not the place for you. And that's, every person needs to make that, self-evaluation so that they make the right decision and they find themselves in the right place.
Sounds like you also have to be comfortable in uncomfortable situations.
Yes. Yes. That's not so simple. It's not so simple. I think I don't think it takes being a rabbi or a rebbetzin to be comfortable in uncomfortable situations. I think there are, some people who are naturally just more relaxed, more easygoing, able to take things in, process, speak confidently, warmly. But you're 100% right. Being comfortable with yourself and what your choices are, people aren't looking to make another person uncomfortable, and they're not looking to sort of catch you, but the more anxious the person messages, it just creates a very uncomfortable dynamic. But if you're comfortable with who you are and what you bring to the table. I'm thinking of so many stories as we're talking, trying to think of which story I should share. But I mean, I just remember this is a slightly different situation because, maybe your question is more within the context of the Jewish community. But in a place like Birmingham, it wasn't just the Jewish community that needed to be navigated. It was the non-Jewish community. And how do you, again, how are you comfortable in your own space, your own religious space, to just be who you are. No apologies, not nasty, not cold, but just, I don't have to apologize, but I have to be confident and feel that needs to be messaged. And I remember being asked to play guitar at the public school, the local public school. And I came with my guitar. It was Hanukkah time, guitar and all my doodads and my parodies. I've been lighting the menorah, all the Hanukkah nights. I've been working on the railroad. Oh, just all my different I did my whole gig. And at the very end, the teacher says, "Oh, it's so nice that you joined. I guess the woman who Jennifer had arranged with, I guess she wasn't able to come." I didn't know that she had asked somebody else, but yeah, I'm so happy that I was able to be here. She says, yeah, she was going to ask, I know that she was going to ask the rabbi's wife. I think that she was expecting a little old lady in a, steel wool with a cane, like hobbling in. And here, somebody's coming in positive, kind of neat and kind of normal and kind of, just cool. Wow, like you can be religious and be regular and it's okay. Like it's not just okay, it's great. And we had such an opportunity to make a kiddush Hashem in so many places. I just the library, the zoo, wherever we went. And I had my boys who look, they're towhead blondes, and people wanted to know how I got them to look like the neighbors because they look like Southerners. And it was not easy to put a yarmulke on our oldest when it was time. We don't have a custom of upsharing, so my boys had haircuts, 1 or 2 years old, and they started to wear a yarmulke. It was easier to for them to wear a ball cap because it evoked questions. Oh, oh, what's your child's name? Yaakov Moshe. That's Hebrew for Jacob Moses. Oh, y'all also, I'm so good at the accent. You think 9 years I would get down pat, but y'all also do double names. Like my daughter's name is Virginia Beth and Catherine Sue. And it's like, gee, you should go to Brooklyn. Everybody has double names. But anyway, but I never said Jacob Moses. I would always say Yaakov Moshe, Hebrew for Jacob. No apologies. Like his name is Yaakov Moshe. His name is not Jacob Moses. And I was always very uh very glad to explain. Even today, people are curious, and I think if people were more comfortable in explaining, um I think it would create greater bonds and more connection with between people.
So if I could just echo what you're
Yeah.
saying, is someone who moves to a small community, just by being themselves, they can make a kiddush Hashem all the time.
Love it. Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Wow, wow.
You're in the library. First of all, now the kids have to be, you know, that was, well behaved, but not always, it's okay. They're normal, they're children. But yes, in the public library, wherever you go. And people are intrigued. People are intrigued. We had an next door neighbor who was he was in insurance. I'm not saying this is the reason why he switched careers, but he when we had our Shalom Zachar for our second, our oldest was born in New York. We so we invited them. We invited them because they were going to be on duty if we had gone to the hospital on Shabbos. Okay, so we said that we're having this event. They couldn't wrap their head around. You got home from the hospital and you are entertaining. Like what? Like, so I remember his wife saying, "You, your wife is a queen." I'm like, okay, that's because it is a little bit insane. But he ended up going into the clergy. He became a man of the cloth. It was really wild. Yeah, I think by just being now, Birmingham is a very, very, very religious city. So to be religious in a religious city, there was definitely an admiration. There's no question. They say that, if the South is the Bible Belt, Birmingham is the buckle of the Bible Belt. Uh, they say there are more churches than gas stations. It's very, very religious. You open up a box of eggs and it'll say, "This is the day the Lord has created. Go and rejoice in it." And you're like, yeah, yeah. So there is definitely something to say for that, being in a religious space, people definitely had more respect for being religious. But I think to the point that you were making, wherever a person is, big city or little city, wherever a person is every single day, and I think this is, so I'm making this very universal. Every single day by saying thank you and please and being gracious and smiling at people and being personable, every person has an opportunity to make a kiddush Hashem wherever you are.
I could tell you, walking the streets of Brooklyn, if you say good morning to people, they're shocked. They're so happy. It's like you made their day.
Right.
So the articles talk a lot about lay leaders. Now, if you go to a small community, there's a limited population of people who can be a lay leader. Did you see, or are you aware of a burnout being a problem?
I think it's something that you always want to keep in mind. You certainly don't want to overburden, one person, but I think one can be strategic, being thoughtful about programming. I'll give you an example. Let's say Sukkot. Yeah, maybe it would be great to have an event every night of Sukkot, but people can't keep up with that. And if you have a limited pool of people who are running the event and also have to attend the event, you're going to exhaust your balabatim. Okay, so make one event a night, or maybe don't always have it at the same person's house. Switch it up. And I think one has to very much be aware, but I think with thought, one can address that issue without saying like, okay, I don't know what to do. I have a limited pool and I don't want to ask anybody because if I ask them, they're gonna, then they'll burn out. No, I think, and I also think that people are coming when you're in a community, a small community, you need to have a greater reservoir of stamina and energy to input into the community. Like if you're coming with limited
Hmm.
bandwidth,
Hmm.
um, you gotta stretch yourself. You have to stretch yourself.
I see in my Brooklyn community, if someone's a president of a shul, by the time you hit 2 years, they're not really they're just running on autopilot. But I guess you're saying in a small community when there's nobody else, you you keep going because you don't want the shul to fall apart.
Correct, and I think that that's not it's it I wanna take that, but view it in the positive, meaning you have something really great to contribute. So why would you wanna limit that? You can give more, you can do more, you can be more. And that's the exciting thing about being in a small community where every person really, really counts. And the articles absolutely spoke to that about people being pulled in or uh, being brought onto the board, younger people who were, catapulted to shul leadership when in a large community. Like, who are you?
Right.
Which is, by the way, maybe not so positive. That's something that bigger communities can learn from smaller communities. That so many people have so much to give, and if you just are able to capitalize on that, there's a lot of energy, and that people could be made to feel you really count, you're important, your ideas, your thoughts. I want to hear them.
So what I have seen in my lengthy years is that shuls sort of they keep the power to whatever age group is sort of the standard, and the younger people just start another shul, and eventually that shul ages,
And you have the same.
but the previous shul ages and it just collapses. People move away, they get older, they die, or whatever happens, and the other shul perpetuates what the previous shul had done. They keep the other, and it's just
A
a
vicious
vicious
cycle.
cycle. I think people are learning. Maybe I'm being optimistic that people are learning and they're starting to create a pipeline and give opportunities to younger people. We've been talking for a while, but I just want to get to one point. One of the sticking points of moving to smaller communities is chinuch. What do you do with your kids? So a lot of places have community schools for the younger grades, but eventually you get to middle school and high school, and you want to be able to give your kids a proper Torah education. What can be done? I mean, in the old days, there was no option other than to move out. Is that still the only option?
Can we talk about the early years first?
Sure.
So before talking about high school, which I do think I think it's a serious question. I'd love to talk for just a couple moments about the early grades because I think there are, eh, I think people can make of something that they may think is a no go. There's so many positive opportunities that children can be exposed to when in a small community that one shouldn't see that if there's only one choice or there's a default. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not trying to sugarcoat or be Pollyanna about this. Challenges, absolutely. Absolutely. But is there what to gain from the experience of being in a one room schoolhouse or a one school town? I do think so. Again, are there more extremes and less extremes or more challenges, less challenges? But there are definitely positive takeaways. Being with children who are not exactly like you, being able to hold your own, to understand the values that are in your own home. Uh, there, you're not outsourcing your values when you're in a small community. You as a parent are taking an active role. These are our principles. These are our values, not in an offensive way. Not that the kid is, the child is going to come into school and, stubborn or difficult, but they need to be able to hold their own when they go to a birthday party and the food is not kosher.
Wow,
And
that's not
and
easy.
no, not at all. Not at all. Been there, done that. And really hard. Really hard. I mean, there's obviously we don't like to call it bribery, we call it incentive. Yes, we then went out for ice cream because it's really hard. It's really hard when you're, in that kind of environment. But the irony is that when we came to Philadelphia, my kids were checking Hechsherim at house that they went to. People were like, "Oh my gosh, what is going on? All these Catholic kids, inspecting our food." Uh, but the kids knew, that it's not a given, and whatever it is, they'll manage. They'll manage, but you gotta own your space. You have to be aware, and just because somebody may not have the same level of observance as you do doesn't mean that they're not somebody who you can learn from or you can, do things with. You just have to hold on to your values. So I do think that there's definitely worthwhile benefits. And in terms of the education, again, still talking about the younger grades, if parents are mindful, you can supplement. And you don't have to supplement in basically recreating school. I'll just share what we did. I would teach my son, or then became my sons, but my oldest, we reviewed yesterday's pasuk and learned a new pasuk, and two pasukim a day.
That's not much.
Two
That's not
pasukim.
hard.
That's really not. It's really not hard. And I remember my brother-in-law who lived in Teaneck saying, "You know what? If he would be in a classroom, he would be spending 15, 20 minutes learning, the new pasuk. Here, he gets you, 5 minutes, or not even. You learn it. Okay." There was something very joyful about the learning, the home learning, and we embraced it. I will agree that it is challenging to get to the upper grades. It is very challenging. Sending kids away is hard. It is hard. And if there's a critical mass, can a community create educational opportunities? It can. Again, not easy. There's a financial load with that too. But it's not out of the realm of possible to have to create a school if there are others who are invested and who are interested. I think it brings me back to the first comment that I made, that it's if someone is looking for a small town experience and this is an issue that they're grappling with, what's going to happen in terms of high school. So then choose a small community that's near a bigger community. And you can have that small community space that you can be someone who really plays an active and important role in your community, in your small community. And if you look through the article, not every one of those communities is, way, way, way out of town. Right. There are communities that are featured. For example, Linden, New Jersey. Linden is commutable to, did I say
Pick Elizabeth.
Oh, that's what I read. So there's certainly opportunity to have the best of both worlds, of having that small, intimate community where your worth is so valuable, and at the same time, the sacrifice in terms of your children's education is not dramatic. Yes, they may not have play dates on Shabbos from their school because their school is not in the
Right.
in the small town, but they they'll find hometown kids to be with on Shabbos. But there's definitely I think that allows for both values to hold strong.
It's interesting. Your experiences from before the year 2000. I wonder if the internet has changed some of the educational possibilities that people have nowadays.
I think definitely has opened up opportunities. We moved from Birmingham in 2007. Okay, certainly pre-Zoom.
Right.
Philadelphia, I wouldn't call small town.
No.
I wouldn't call it small town. But I do think, yeah, I think you're right. I think that there's definitely more opportunity. And yeah, I think that is definitely a challenge. That is definitely a challenge. But the other thing to think about is if people go early in their lives, earlier in their family development, you can get in a good solid we lived in Birmingham till our oldest was going into 5th grade. 9 years. So 9 years is a sizable amount of time, and I think a wonderful investment in our family. Really no regrets. I always say Baruch Hashem for what was and Baruch Hashem for what is. To have that opportunity and that I wouldn't trade it. You know, when it came up as an opportunity, Birmingham, Alabama. I'm on public TV. I don't want to say more, but it was, like Birmingham, and it was from the moment that the plane landed, had not even landed yet, and I just had this premonition that we were gonna love it, and we did, and that was something that really added dimensions to who we became as certainly as a rabbinic couple, the relationships that we created, and certainly for our kids. My kids wear that with pride. They always say, "Roll Tide." But they really do. The 3 of our children have that on their birth certificate, Birmingham, Alabama, and, they bring it up all the time. That's a real so and, the younger ones were young when we moved, but it was something that they really we talk about it all the time. When we were in Birmingham, always, every Shabbos, at least once.
And your husband went from being a rabbi of the shul in Birmingham to was the largest Orthodox shul in three states or something like that.
The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
But also multiple other states also.
Delaware has a very small footprint. So okay, yeah, we'll take that.
And you want to come here and start this women's initiative. It sounds like that small town of Birmingham was a great training ground for doing incredible things in the future.
Yeah, I wouldn't even I would. I'm gonna just take the word training. I would just say a great living opportunity for growth, for understanding of people, or creating programs for learning about things, and certainly for my husband, exposure to opportunities in terms of kashrus, in terms of uh all different aspects of the rabbinate, that if you're in a large community, you may not have those opportunities because other people are doing it, and when you're there and that's it. You're the the soul the soul of the community. You really have to step up, and really we feel very blessed.
He had to do everything, but at least he didn't have to be the shochet.
Correct. And he actually did not learn Mila. There was a point where we were talking about it, and it then things become very complex. So yeah, but there were so many things that we had, opportunity to be involved with. Just interestingly, just even Chaber Kadisha, it was really one of what I was most regretful, that when we were moving to Philadelphia, I couldn't imagine in a big city that one could be involved with the Chaber Kadisha and still manage a family. And like, how do you do that? There's so many people, and there's obviously so many taros, and I learned a few years into being in Philadelphia that you absolutely can, and it's not something that you're not signing away every single night. There's a rotation, so I think it's something also to think about, that yes, in a small town, you're asked to step up and step forward, but you can step up and step forward in a big town too. Every person has what to give and what to share and what to contribute. And, nobody should use the excuse, well, because I live in a big city, nobody needs me, or I don't have to come forward. No, everybody, whether it's mikvah, I'm thinking about women's, spaces, mikvah, Chaber Kadisha, sisterhood, There's so many opportunities. Again, small town, big town. Get them.
Hey, beautiful words. Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Rebbetzin Dr. Adina Shmidman, for joining us. And we look forward to see the many wonderful things that you are continuing to do.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for joining us for part 2 of the conversation with Rebbetzin Dr. Adina Shmidman. Subscribe to Jewish Action the podcast to make sure you are notified when the next podcast is released. And follow us on social media so you can keep up with all the latest.